Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Why the Pen Test Needs an Update, sponsored by Horizon3.ai. My name is Carol, author of SANS. Today's featured speakers are Dave Shackleford, SANS Senior Instructor and Subject Matter Expert, and Snehal Antani, CEO and co-founder of Horizon3.ai. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the Q&A window at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to our presenters.
Excellent. Hey, thanks, Carol, and thanks everybody for joining today. Super excited to be here to talk about this admittedly controversial sounding topic, which, of course, you start thinking to yourself, well, what does he mean the pen test needs an update? So let's go to the next slide. Again, my name is Dave Shackleford, and I'm going to be kicking us off here. But it's going to be a little bit more of a back and forth conversation, myself and Snehal here. But let's go on to the next slide, and I'll kind of introduce the topic, as it were. So I think for anybody that is a pen tester or does red team work or is thinking about doing that kind of work, there's sort of a classic modality of performing pen tests that we've had traditionally, and there's lots of tools, there's lots of techniques, we all know that, and that's not necessarily what we want to talk about here today. It's more of sort of where some of the gaps might be in the entire concept of performing pen testing and what we can do about that. And I think what I have found, certainly as somebody that's been a pen tester since, I don't know, probably about 17 years ago, and I've seen the changes in the industry, I've seen some of the challenges that organizations have faced right up close as a consultant and as an instructor for SANS. What I've discovered is that, and I think most of the pen testing faculty at SANS would probably agree with me on this, is that you can train people to do the work, and you can train them on tools, and people can get that hands-on experience, and we can sort of hack and slash our way through a variety of different attack strategies, but we can't do it as often as we'd like to. And in fact, for especially large organizations, even those with dedicated teams that are focused on nothing but pen testing, they're just not getting the coverage that they need. And I think that is a huge problem for us because it limits our sort of understanding of where our real vulnerabilities are from a larger scale perspective. And so I think that's something that's sort of tying in, but we're also relying on vulnerability scans in many of our pen testing regimens. And there's reasons for that, right? I mean, number one, vulnerability scanners have a purpose. Right. I mean, I think today it's a must-have solution of some type for most organizations out there, but they can be disruptive. And certainly in many organizations with lots of weird applications and services, which, let's face it, we've all got, there's a lot of false positives. So you have to sort of wade through all that and go, well, where do I focus now for pen tests? And so by the time you eventually get to the actual pen testing portion of this, right, and you're doing this manually as a human being with a brain, you're, number one, limited on time, and you're sort of narrowly focused on one or more things, and you've got to sort of bounce from one thing to the other. And again, speaking even for myself, I feel like I do a pretty good job of multitasking, but there's only so much multitasking you can do, and especially at scale, that is a real challenge to overcome. So let's go to the next slide. And I just want to introduce the Horizon3.ai Node Zero platform, which was really cool. I got a really, sort of great insight into this solution, which is focused on automation, right? It's really focused on automation. It's really focused on performing more automated penetration tests for a couple of very specific reasons. And I had the opportunity to really get some deep insight into this. Cool use cases, right? So number one, and I love this term, the sparring partner for the SOC, which means, look, the SOC needs, somebody to poke at them, right? And that's happening all the time in the real world anyway. But if you can create that model where they're constantly being challenged, they've got the opportunity to tune all of their tools and all of their playbooks and all of their workflows and develop more efficiencies around things like response, that's only going to help us. For the blue team, they can also perform self-service pen tests, right? This can be done in a pre-configured and more automated way so that the blue team improves as well. So the SOC is getting better, The blue team has the opportunity, they don't have to wait on a red team or a dedicated pen testing regimen to kick things off and say, hey, we put a new control in place, we put some new monitoring in place. Let's validate that. Let's see what we would do if it actually showed up on the radar, and we don't have to wait on anybody to do that. It's also improved efficiency for the red team, and I love this one because even the best red teams still are limited by their operational capacity and the size of the team. And so if we can do more and do it more effectively and do it more repeatably across the entire scope of our environments, the red team's only going to improve, and they're only going to be able to see more, cover more, and do more for the work that they're doing, which of course is to find things before the actual attackers do and demonstrate those. So there's some huge benefits, I think, to the solution. I mean, it's number one, I love the fact that it's agentless. The agentless deployment won me immediately. There's like real depth of validation of the exploits, and actually in a lot of these scenarios with exploitation, there's multiple opportunities and options presented, which is great. So it's, hey, this is what it really looks like, and this is exactly what was done to validate this. And there's command lines and things, which you'll see here in just one second, which is phenomenal. And I am a sucker for good visualization. And there's reasons for that, not just because I like pretty pictures. And I'm sure some of you feel that statement. It's because it's better for us, truthfully. Human beings aren't great at digging down into the minutiae of, like long-winded streams of code and event data and other things. I want to see that attack path in a visual model so that I can, sort of mentally say, okay, this attack went from asset A to asset B. Here's how it occurred. This lateral movement occurred thereafter. These opportunities presented themselves from that point, and seeing again that visually not only helps us, but it's also phenomenal for carrying that knowledge and carrying that sort of learning exercise over to people that might not be as technical and that might not necessarily have an understanding if you show them a big, long-winded command line of some sort of exploitation scenario that was actually occurring. So I think, you look at those types of things as opportunities to get better, be faster, and move forward with our pen testing regimen. So let's go on to the next slide. And really, I'm going to give some quick highlights with some commentary here. This is just showing you one example of attack path visualization, which of course, it's a screenshot on a slide. So don't squint too hard to dig into this. But trust me when I tell you, there's a ton of detail baked into every step of this that helps people understand exactly what they're looking at.
Yeah, and Dave, it's a great rundown. This is Snehal. Just to build on top of that, the key word that you use there is understanding, because as an attack occurs, the more time, whether it's a red teamer or a blue teamer, spends in understanding the attack path, the better they can articulate what needs to be fixed to their teammates. And now there's no longer this automatic or reaction of that. This is a false positive. I'm so tired of your vulnerability scanner telling me this is an issue, but it really wasn't. Now you can truly understand the attack path and explain it in a way that allows you to decide what to fix and what not to fix. And the other part, and this goes back to a lot of innovation we did over at Horizon 3, this attack path isn't hard coded anywhere in my product. So think of when IBM played Garry Kasparov in chess. IBM didn't hard code 40 million chess games and say, Gary must be playing game number 332. IBM looked at every piece on the board and determined the next best action. And the way that we operate is we're building knowledge graphs. We're running reinforcement learning, Markov decision processes, and other things to help build out these next best action algorithms. And what that means for you as a red teamer or as a blue teamer is if your environment changes, you don't have to modify or keep up any attack scripts that synchronize with your environment. When you rerun the pen test, it'll automatically identify the next best actions and build up a new attack path representing how it exploited the current environment. And so it's completely adaptive in how it executes.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Let's go to the next slide and hit some other fun stuff here. So this is for the pen testers. This is for the folks that really want to see under the hood. And of course, that's all of us, right? We always want to see exactly what's going on. But I love this view, right? This brings me right down into the weeds. so that, I'm not just taking the word of the platform and saying, oh, well, pretty picture looks great, but what did you really do to get there, right? What kind of commands were run? What kind of tools were executed? How were they executed? What flags were run? And speaking as a pen tester, I will actually say, as somebody that does this for a living, I've had a lot more clients over the past decade or so ask for this kind of evidence in reporting, saying, hey, look, don't just tell me, don't show me a screenshot of you sitting at a command prompt. Show me what got you there. And so you really have to take sort of a record of all those steps and stages. And this basically automates that for you. I love that. So, it's taken like all the number one guesswork out of the whole thing, but it's sort of almost like an audit trail along the way, which frankly, everybody wants to go back and look at and say, so wait a minute, you're showing me this, but what was the step that you actually went through to get to this? And there it is, right? J. Smith, obviously. So yeah, love this feature as well. And this is, again, just a tiny snippet of some of the proof that was within some of the various examples that were provided. Let's go on to the next slide.
I was saying the key point there.
Okay, sorry, Snehal.
Yeah, so the key point there is proof. You can't just simulate, you've got to actually exploit, but do so in a way that's safe for production. So there's lots of ways to exploit things or execute commands. For instance, turn on responder to harvest or hashes through man in the middle. Once you've got that hash, try to crack it. And if you've cracked that hash, now try to successfully log in, which is how this attack occurred. And in there, all of that's safe to run in production, but you want to be able to show every step of the way. So you'll see in the path, responder was run. Here's the hash that was collected. Here's how quickly we cracked that hash into a clear text password because you've got poor credential reuse or poor credential complexity rules and policies in place. And here is us successfully logging into the domain controller to show that we got domain admin on the box. No CVEs, no malware were used in that particular attack. Can you catch it? What could you do about it? And now it's not being simulated, but you're actually seeing the exploitation occur. But once again, in a way that's safe for production.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, safe for production is certainly better than not safe for production. So the last highlight that I just wanted to bring up that I just thought was super, super cool. And again, coming from experience, certainly as a pen tester, somebody that's digging around in an environment, what I don't always have is context, right? What I don't always have is some sort of knowledge of criticality or all the details around exposure level and so forth. And I actually always tell my classes this, right? If I'm teaching a pen testing class, and some of you, hey, who knows, might have been in a class with me at some point, I'm like, look, if I find a vulnerability that has a risk ranking of, critical, it's 9.7 or something, it's very high up there, and it's sitting right on the internet, I'm going to take it right there, right? Yeah, that's a big problem. But if I find that exact same flaw on the exact same build of a server that's 17 layers deep in a test lab that has basically no data, no exposure to a lot of other things, I'm going to adjust that, right? And I think you can't just give a one-size-fits-all report to people and say, well, look at this, look at this vulnerability that was exposed, or look at this thing that I exploited, without bringing in that additional context around it. And so this is something that's built into the platform that I thought was really awesome, this contextual vulnerability scoring to say, hey, look, we're not just taking it at face value, right? We're not just going, okay, let's do a quick test to say, hey, is this thing vulnerable or not? And can we exploit it or not? It goes beyond that. It's more, what is the platform? Where is the platform? What might be relevant around the platform that could lead to additional damage or horrible, terrible things happening within the environment? And that's just enormously useful because it gives you a more pragmatic and realistic output of the test itself, which means that people can rely on the results more at face value without having to go, but is this really a big deal or not? So it saves a lot of time, I think.
Yeah, and building on that point, David, when I was a CIO, the hardest part of my job was deciding what not to fix because I had limited capacity to take fix actions. And so in this example, SMB signing not required by default is a 1 out of 10 CVSS score. But Node Zero, our autonomous pen testing platform, was able to use this misconfiguration. It's not even a CVE, it's a misconfig, to successfully become domain admin And it also exploited this to successfully become local admin on multiple boxes and gain access to a bunch of data. And because of that context of this enabling us to become domain admin, it should be treated as a critical. But it's not a critical everywhere. Of the 7 occurrences that were found, 4 of them didn't enable us to do anything of value. So I can now defensively and justifiably explain to the board and the regulators, I did not fix these 4 occurrences, and here's why. They didn't allow the attacker to do anything. However, I did go fix the 3 that were critical that enabled us to, that enabled the attacker to compromise sensitive data or take over my domain. Once again, the hardest part of the job is deciding what not to fix. And now you've got not hypothetical, but actual exploitation evidence to show what is important to fix and what you can put on your backlog and deal with when appropriate. And so if I kind of build on from there and take a step back, so one, David, thank you for that overview. I think your perspective and the SANS perspective and the number of pen tests, the amount of experience you have is just awesome. And your insights are really valuable there. If you take a step back for a moment and think about the challenges and shortcomings we have as a security community. In my background, when I was a CIO, my background when I was at Splunk on the road as a CTO, working with strategic customers in security, and then my time in DoD, I had a very consistent set of frustrations across each of those jobs, which is, how do I know I'm secure? And why do I have to wait for a breach to test my security posture and verify that my tools are working, my procedures are correct, and that I've fixed the right things? Because if I've got to wait for a breach to verify my posture, by then it's too late. And how do I proactively find and fix my security weaknesses and proactively verify my security controls before a breach? So here's an example. Attackers don't have to hack in using 0 days like you'd see in the movies. Often they're able to just log in with valid credentials that they've found. And so in this example of a credential attack, where you're going to harvest a bunch of user IDs from LinkedIn, you're going to do credential stuffing and credential spraying, reusing either weak password credentials or easily guessable, or pulling data from a password breach database and being able to spray and pray until you get into one of the externally exposed services. From there, you start to pilfer and iterate until you're able to chain together credentials, misconfigurations, and dangerous defaults to achieve your objective. And in this example, where attackers have adapted from having to use CVEs and malware to chaining together these other issues, can you as a defender detect this? And how do you actually know? And once again, why wait for a breach to find out? And I'll give you 2 customer examples that I was just shocked by. The first one, and really the tagline is, my EDR should have caught that. This was a healthcare organization in the southeast of the United States. And some background information for those on the call, I'm sure you know this, but just to get some basic background. 2 key parts of the story are LSAS, right? LSAS is the process in Windows that after you've logged in, will store your credentials so you don't have to re-log in every time you touch a network share or another service. It's basically a cache for authenticating much faster and authorizing much faster. And attackers seek to gain access and dump the LSAS process because they'll get every single user ID password pair, whether in clear text or as the hash, stored within that process. So it's a very juicy process to target as an attacker. And the other key piece of background information is domain administrator. If an attacker can become domain admin, they've got the keys to the kingdom. And that's it, it's game over. They can do almost anything that they want. So in this example, Node 0 was able to successfully get remote code execution on a box, dump LSAS, laterally maneuver, and then become domain admin. And when the customer first saw this proof and path along the way, their reaction was, there's no way this is true. There's no way. We've got Fortinet, we've got it installed everywhere as our EDR platform. You should have been stopped. And sure enough, when you click on the proof of every one of those steps, the customer was able to realize, no, we successfully harvested credentials, successfully got code execution, dumped LSAS, elevated privileges. And when they talked to Fortinet, it turned out that out of the 1,000 endpoints that they had, Fortinet EDR wasn't properly installed on 3 of them. They would have had no idea of this misconfiguration until it was too late. But here they're able to proactively verify their controls. The second problem, which is a little bit more awkward, and having been on the vendor side, I would not want to be Fortinet in this discussion, is they said, well, Fortinet, I realized that we misconfigured our EDR on 3 endpoints, but your brochure, your marketing says your product should have stopped the lateral movement. Why didn't you? And it turns out the customer didn't buy the right modules from Fortinet, the vendor. And so that was a very awkward conversation that I was glad I wasn't directly part of. But the point is, why wait until you're in the news to verify that your security tools are actually working and that they're configured properly and they're defending you effectively? The second customer story I'll tell you is, and the tagline here is, I thought we were patched. And the key piece of background information is zero logon, a very nasty CVE that came out about 2 years ago that allows an attacker to very quickly become domain admin on a box through an exploitation. And here, Node Zero successfully exploited zero logon to become domain admin at a very large healthcare system in New Jersey. The problem with that healthcare system is all of their Microsoft and Qualys reports said that zero logon had been successfully patched. And so of course, the initial reaction is, no way, this is a false positive, I don't believe you. As you click on the proof and you see the proof of exploitation along the way, there was a pucker factor that hit them of, oh my God, we have been misreporting our vulnerability status for 18 months. Because in the zero logon patch, what happens is the step one of the patch is they modify the Microsoft registry keys to say the patch has been applied. And then step two is they actually apply the binary. Well, Cylance blocked the binary from being applied. And so while they were reporting everything was good to go, they were actually still vulnerable and exploitable to that issue for 18 months. So after realizing this, they've changed their process to have not only Patch Tuesday, but now Pen Test Wednesday to verify that their security posture is what they expect it to be, and they are no longer exploitable to a whole bunch of problems. And so it really comes down to, you can't trust your security tools are working. You have to verify that they're working for you. And the best example of a customer adoption here is, one, the motivation of having to pay pen testing consultants to come in once a year or a couple of times a year. And to Dave's point, they have a very narrow scope because of just manpower. They didn't have the manpower required to pen test the entire organization. So they ended up doing a very narrow slice. Well, as a result, they're leaving a lot of attack surface on the table. They got breached, their CISO got fired, and they ended up quickly shifting to this autonomous pen testing motion. And they shifted from annual pen testing to running daily pen tests. And now they're running 40 pen tests a month. So this is already outdated. They were for 16 to 40. The two key use cases are sparring partner for the SOC, as Dave mentioned, but also their IT admins and network engineers have the power of a 20-year pen testing veteran in 3 clicks. What we've really done is empowered the blue team to proactively harden their environment. And we've also empowered the red team to become a force multiplier. And what that's created is this behavior of, they run the autonomous pen test to find problems. The blue team will go off and fix them, and then they'll rerun the pen test to verify that the problems have been fixed. And as they did this in their adoption, you can see early on, they kept running pen tests and they started finding more and more problems. And then they hit this cultural effect, which is the red and blue teams stopped being adversarial and they started collaborating and working together. And in doing so, you can see a dramatic reduction in the weaknesses per host over time. And they really started to employ this purple team culture of red and blue working together to proactively harden their environment. So I'll leave you with, and we'll have plenty of time for questions here, a couple of key points. The first is, why does this matter? When you think about shifting from a peacetime security mindset to a wartime security mindset, really that shift is tabletop exercises and simulation was okay or just barely enough to fend off criminals. But when you start to shift towards committed nation states going after you, or more sophisticated criminal organizations that have the time, money, and patience to target you, you need to start shifting to a wartime mindset where you are training like you fight. You can't, if you want to go box, you're not going to train for that boxing match playing Mike Tyson's Punch Out. You've got to start sparring Tyson and start to get better and understand what it's like to get hit, to get punched, and make sure you've got the right tools, the right processes, and the right training so that your reaction to an attack is muscle memory. The second thing is if I'm on the board of an organization, don't tell me that we're secure. Show me. Show me that my crown jewels are protected, and then show me again tomorrow, and then show me again next week, because the environment changes on a regular basis and the enemy has a vote. They are adapting their tactics. And so you have to continuously verify your security posture. This snapshot in time mindset, I don't think is going to be relevant or valuable going forward, especially when we see an increase in nation state attacks, wartime mindset of the attacker, and well-resourced criminal organizations capable of investing a lot more time. So we'll kind of pause there and take questions from the field, and I'll just leave this this summary slide up for you guys to see kind of what we do at a snapshot. But I'd love to take some questions here. And Dave, any final comments from you?
Yeah, well, first off, you just crushed my boxing training strategy. So I'm a little disappointed in that, but I think the reality is, this concept of the tabletop, is more about helping you figure out your strategy, right? There's a strategic element to that's critical. You can't not have it, but I definitely think there's more of a tactical representation here that is limited by capacity, right? It's really an operational limitation to be, even if you have the most skilled pen testers out there, there's only so many of them, and there's only so much that can go around. And I think more coverage and I love the repeatability. I'll just tell you, I think the repeatability factor is huge, because that's a challenge that comes in all the time is, so this happened once, was it a fluke? Or is it something that can be demonstrated repeatably over and over again? And it's a control in its own right. That's where I think the concept of, pen testing shifts from being this, sort of, super sexy unicorns and rainbows situation where it's magic to, nope, it's actually a control that is a validation tactic and technique to demonstrably show you where a vulnerability exists. And the more repeatable you can make that, the better off you're going to be as an organization.
That's exactly it. Back to Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And so, that I think you're right. The tabletops are great for strategy and strategic thinking and planning, and also some level of initial roles and responsibilities and coordination. That's how we used it over in financial services, and I participate in lots of these. But when you see the attacker gain that initial access, and you're starting to see them elevate privileges and alerts being triggered and so on, you got to have that muscle memory so you know what to do, because attackers are only getting better and faster. For example, Node 0 in 7 minutes and 19 seconds fully compromised the bank. No humans involved, no custom scripting, just straight up autonomous pen testing techniques. 7 minutes and 19 seconds. That bank had every Gucci security tool you could buy, yet not a single security alert was triggered, because we don't have a tools problem as defenders. We have an effectiveness problem of getting all these different tools from different vendors to work together. And if we could do it in 7 minutes today, a year from now, we're going to be able to do it in a minute, or less. And we're the good guys. The bad guys are also trying to invest in this level of speed of attack. And the human is going to quickly become the bottleneck in that scenario as a defender. But in the meantime, effectiveness and that muscle memory is what allows us to effectively fight and defend our terrain.
All right. Well, with that, we are out of time. I'll be sure to forward along any questions your way for an answer. So thank you so much, Dave and Snehal, for your great presentation.
Awesome.
Horizon3.ai for sponsoring this webcast, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.